In the vast expanse of the Galactic Alliance, where 1,000 species from across the stars gather to learn the arts of war and diplomacy, there exists a truth that chills even the bravest warriors to their core: never underestimate a human who has been overlooked. The Titan Academy stands as the pinnacle of military excellence, its crystalline spires reaching toward distant suns, housing the children of emperors, the heirs of warrior dynasties, and the genetic elite of countless worlds. Here, legends are born and destinies are forged in the crucible of competition and combat. But, sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that nobody sees coming. This is the story of how a single human girl, dismissed as weak by her peers and forgotten by her instructors, became the name whispered in terror across battlefields spanning dozens of star systems. A name that would make hardened veterans check their shadows and cause enemy fleets to retreat at its mere mention. Her classmates knew her as the quiet one who barely passed her courses. The galaxy would come to know her by a different name entirely, one that would redefine what it means to be human in a universe full of monsters. The greatest hunters, after all, are those who are never seen until it's far too late. The morning alarm echoed through the crystalline halls of Titan Academy with its usual piercing efficiency, designed to wake even the deepest sleeping species among the student body. Maya-chan rolled out of her narrow bunk in Dormitory Block 7, Section C, the housing reserved for scholarship students and those whose families couldn't afford the premium quarters in the upper levels. She dressed quickly in the standard-issue gray uniform, her movements economical and precise. Around her, other students of various species prepared for another day of classes, their conversations a mixture of galactic common and their native tongues. The Zenthari twins, Kex and Vex, were discussing their upcoming combat assessment in their clicking language while applying their ceremonial war paint. Across the room, Thorak, a massive Bronthan whose species was known for their incredible strength and short tempers, was carefully polishing his traditional battle hammer. Maya gathered her datapad and the few personal belongings she kept in her footlocker: a small photo of Earth, a worn book of ancient human poetry, and a simple silver ring that had belonged to her grandmother. These items seemed pathetic compared to the exotic weapons, family crests, and technological marvels that her dorm mates possessed, but they were hers. As she headed toward the door, Kex looked up from his war paint application. "Shen, you're taking advanced tactical theory today, right?" His voice carried the typical Zenthari clicking undertones that most species found unsettling. Maya paused, surprised that he had spoken to her directly. In the 18 months she had been at the academy, very few students had bothered to learn her name, let alone engage her in conversation. "Yes, with Commander Xalos." "Better you than me," Vex chimed in, his twins markings slightly different but equally intimidating. "I heard he made a Kytherian noble cry last week. Their tears can melt steel, you know." Thorax snorted, a sound like grinding stone. "Kytherians are weak. All emotion, no substance. But humans." He looked at Maya with something that might have been curiosity. "Humans are strange. Small and soft, but they keep showing up where they don't belong." Maya wasn't sure if that was meant as an insult or a compliment, so she simply nodded and left the dormitory. The corridors of Titan Academy were a marvel of engineering, their walls made of a translucent material that shifted colors based on the time of day and the mood of the station's central AI. This morning, they glowed with a soft amber light that was supposed to promote alertness and learning. The Academy was home to nearly 50,000 students from across the Galactic Alliance, representing over 800 different species. It was the most prestigious military institution in known space, where the future leaders of planetary defense forces, Starfleet admirals, and elite special operations units were trained. The competition for admission was fierce, and the dropout rate was nearly 60%. Maya had earned her place through pure academic merit, scoring in the 99th percentile on the entrance examinations despite coming from a small colony world that most galactic citizens couldn't find on a map. Earth was considered a backwater planet, recently admitted to the Alliance and still struggling to find its place among the established powers. She made her way through the flowing crowds of students, her smaller stature allowing her to move unnoticed between the larger aliens. A group of Ascorian cadets, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming with polish and their ceremonial blades hanging at their sides, were discussing the upcoming war games that would determine class rankings. Maya caught fragments of their conversation as she passed. "The simulation this year is based on the siege of Korvac Prime," one of them was saying, his mandibles clicking with excitement. 15 teams, urban warfare scenario, full environmental hazards. My clutch sister participated in the real siege, another replied. She said the human forces there fought like mad beings. No strategy, no honor, just endless aggression. Maya kept walking, but her steps slowed slightly. She had read about Korvat Prime. It had been one of the first major conflicts where human forces had served alongside Alliance troops. The official reports called it a victory, but the casualty figures told a different story. The Advanced Tactical Theory classroom was located in the Academy's Strategic Studies wing, a section of the station reserved for the most challenging courses. Maya arrived early, as was her habit, and took a seat in the back row where she could observe without drawing attention. The classroom filled slowly with students, most of them from species known for their military prowess. Commander Exelos entered precisely at the scheduled time, his 4 arms carrying multiple data displays and his elongated head crowned with the neural interface crown that marked him as a member of the Ethereal caste. The Ethereals were renowned throughout the galaxy for their strategic thinking and their ability to process multiple complex scenarios simultaneously. Today, Commander Exelos began, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones of his species. We will examine the concept of asymmetric warfare and its applications in modern conflict. His main eyes focused on the class while his secondary eyes continued to scan the data displays. Can anyone provide a definition of asymmetric warfare? Several hands went up immediately. The commander pointed to Zarath, a Valkyrian whose species had conquered 3 star systems through superior military doctrine. Asymmetric warfare is when forces of unequal strength engage in combat, requiring the weaker force to employ unconventional tactics to level the playing field, Zarath answered, her voice carrying the confident tones of someone who had never doubted her superiority. Correct, but incomplete, Commander Exelos replied. Who can expand on this definition? More hands rose. Maya remained silent, as she usually did. She had learned early in her academy career that drawing attention to herself rarely had positive results. Cadet Thorik, the commander called on a massive Gorathan whose species was famous for their siege warfare tactics. Asymmetric warfare also involves targeting enemy weaknesses that conventional forces would ignore, though Rick rumbled. Supply lines, civilian morale, communication networks. Better, the commander acknowledged. Now, let us examine a case study. The Third Centauri conflict, specifically the Battle of Junction 7. The defending force was outnumbered 15-1, faced with superior technology and firepower, yet they achieved a decisive victory. How? The class erupted in discussion. Maya listened as her classmates offered various explanations: superior defensive positions, environmental advantages, technological innovations. All of their answers were technically correct but missed the deeper truth that Maya could see clearly. Commander Exelos allowed the discussion to continue for several minutes before calling for silence. All valid points, but you are focusing on the symptoms, not the cause. The defenders won because they understood something their attackers did not. They understood that sometimes the strongest weapon is not being seen as a weapon at all. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The commander's secondary eyes were looking directly at her. The defending force at Junction 7 was primarily human, Exelos continued. A species that most of the galaxy still considers primitive and militarily insignificant. The attacking force prepared for conventional warfare against conventional opponents. They did not prepare for enemies who would turn their own evacuation tunnels into kill zones, who would use children as spotters, who would continue fighting even when critically wounded. The classroom had grown very quiet. Maya noticed that several of her classmates were now looking at her, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. The humans at Junction 7 won because their enemies underestimated them, the commander said. They appeared weak, disorganized, and desperate. In reality, they were none of these things. They were simply playing by different rules. After class, Maya gathered her materials and headed toward the door, hoping to escape before anyone could corner her for uncomfortable questions. She wasn't fast enough. Chen called Zarath, the Valkyrian whose answer had started the discussion. Can I ask you something? Maya stopped, knowing that refusing would only draw more attention. What? Is it true what they say about human warfare? That you fight without honor? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Maya looked at Zarath's face, searching for malice but finding only genuine curiosity. Around them, other students had slowed their departure, clearly interested in her answer. I wouldn't know, Maya replied carefully. I've never been in a war. But, you must have studied your species' military history, pressed Thorik, who had apparently joined the conversation. What do you think about the commander's analysis? Maya considered her words carefully. She could feel the weight of their attention, the way they were looking at her as if she represented something larger than herself. I think, she said finally, that every species fights differently because every species has different strengths and different definitions of victory. That's not an answer, Zarath said, but not unkindly. Come on, Chen. You're one of the top students in strategic analysis. You must have opinions about human military doctrine. Maya met her gaze steadily. Human military doctrine is built around adaptation. We don't have natural armor like the Askers, we don't have the size and strength of the Bronthans, we don't have the technological advantages of the Ethereals. So we learn to be flexible. To use whatever tools are available. To win by any means necessary. Any means necessary, though Rick repeated, his massive brow furrowing. Even dishonorable means? Honor is a luxury, Maya said, her voice quieter now. You can afford to worry about honor when you're strong enough to win fairly. When you're not. She shrugged. You do what you have to do. The conversation ended there, but Maya could feel the change in how they looked at her as she left the classroom. It wasn't respect exactly, but it was something more than the casual dismissal she was used to. It was the beginning of wariness. The rest of her day passed in a blur of lectures and practical exercises. Physical conditioning with Sergeant Major Krell, where she struggled to keep up with the naturally stronger aliens but finished every exercise. Xenobiology with Dr. Senth, where her knowledge of human anatomy proved surprisingly relevant when discussing biological vulnerabilities. Weapons training, where her smaller size was actually an advantage when learning to operate the Academy's diverse arsenal. It was during the weapons training session that Maya first encountered Lieutenant Colonel Vash, the Academy's senior combat instructor. Vash was a predac, a species of apex hunters whose very presence made most other beings nervous. He was observing the students as they worked through their marksmanship drills, his vertical pupils tracking each shot with predatory focus. Maya was working with a standard Alliance pulse rifle, a weapon designed to be usable by multiple species but optimized for none. Her scores were decent but not exceptional, exactly what she aimed for. Too low and she would face remedial training, too high and she would attract unwanted attention. Cadet Chen, Lieutenant Colonel Vash called out, his voice carrying the subsonic growl that marked his species. Demonstrate the Valkyrian quickdraw technique. Maya's heart sank. The Valkyrian quickdraw was designed for beings with 4 arms and enhanced reflexes. It was nearly impossible for most species to execute properly, and she had no idea why he was asking her to attempt it. She moved to the demonstration area, aware that the other students had stopped their own drills to watch. The technique required drawing 2 weapons simultaneously, engaging multiple targets, and reloading on the move, all within a 6-second window. Maya picked up the secondary weapon, feeling its unfamiliar weight. She had studied the technique extensively in theory but had never attempted it with live rounds. She took her position, waiting for the signal. Begin, Vash commanded. Maya moved. Her draw was not as smooth as a Valkyrian's would have been, her aim not as precise, her reload not as fluid. But she completed the sequence in 7.3 seconds, hitting 6 of the 8 targets. It was a respectable performance for any non-Valkyrian student. Adequate, Vash said, his tone giving nothing away. Now demonstrate the Ascorian blade dance. Maya blinked. The blade dance was a melee combat technique that required incredible flexibility and coordination. It was traditionally performed with weapons designed for chitinous appendages, not human hands. But she moved to the melee area and picked up the practice blades. The blade dance was a flowing sequence of cuts, thrusts, and blocks that created an almost hypnotic pattern of movement. Maya had memorized the sequence from instructional videos, but executing it with human anatomy was like trying to translate poetry from one language to another. Something was always lost in the process. She began the sequence, her movements slower and more deliberate than they should have been. The blades felt awkward in her hands, requiring her to adjust her grip constantly to compensate for the differences in her finger structure. But she completed the full sequence without dropping a weapon or making any critical errors. Interesting, Vash murmured. Now the Gorathan power strike. Maya looked at him in disbelief. The Gorathan power strike was designed for beings who could weigh up to 800 kilograms and had bone density 3 times that of humans. It was less a technique than a demonstration of raw physical power. Sir, she said carefully, I don't think attempt it, Vash interrupted. Adapt it to your capabilities. Maya stared at the heavy training weapon, knowing that trying to execute a traditional Gorathan power strike would likely result in serious injury. But she also realized what Vash was testing. He wasn't asking her to demonstrate alien techniques perfectly. He was asking her to demonstrate human adaptability. She picked up the weapon, feeling its weight. Instead of trying to replicate the overhead strike that defined the traditional technique, she shifted her grip and stance. She used momentum instead of raw strength, leverage instead of power. Her strike, when it came, was nothing like a Gorathan power strike, but it was devastating in its own way. The training dummy's head exploded in a shower of synthetic material. The gymnasium had gone completely silent. Maya lowered the weapon, breathing hard from the exertion. Class dismissed, Lieutenant Colonel Vash said quietly. Cadet Chen, remain behind. Maya waited as the other students filed out, some of them casting curious glances in her direction. When they were alone, Vash approached her, his predatory grace making her instinctively want to back away. You have been hiding, he said without preamble. Sir? Your academic scores place you in the 75th percentile. Your physical conditioning scores are average. Your weapons proficiency is adequate. Your tactical simulations show competent but unremarkable performance. Vash circled her slowly, and Maya had to force herself not to track his movement like prey watching a predator. But what I just witnessed suggests capabilities far beyond what your official records indicate. Maya said nothing, unsure how to respond without making the situation worse. The Valkyrian quick draw requires spatial awareness and hand-eye coordination in the 95th percentile. The Ascorian blade dance demands pattern recognition and kinesthetic intelligence at near-genius levels. Your adaptation of the Gorathan power strike showed tactical creativity that borders on brilliance. Vash stopped directly in front of her. So I ask again, why have you been hiding? Maya met his gaze, recognizing that this was a moment that could define the rest of her time at the academy. She could continue to deflect, to maintain her careful facade of mediocrity. Or she could trust this predator who seemed to see through her disguise anyway. Because, she said finally, at the academy, standing out gets you noticed. Being noticed gets you tested. Being tested reveals your capabilities. And, once people know what you can do, they also know what you might do to them. Vash's vertical pupils dilated slightly, the predac equivalent of a smile. Wisdom beyond your years, cadet. But, hiding has its own risks. The galaxy is becoming more dangerous, and the Alliance will need warriors who can adapt to threats that conventional training cannot prepare them for. Respectfully, sir, Maya said, I didn't come here to become a warrior. I came here to learn. The two are not mutually exclusive, Vash replied. Report to Training Base 7 tomorrow at 0500 hours. We begin your real education then, . As Maya left the gymnasium, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had just changed. For 18 months, she had successfully maintained her low profile, learned everything she could without drawing attention, and positioned herself to graduate with decent marks and a commission in some safe, unremarkable posting. But now Lieutenant Colonel Vash knew what she was capable of, and somehow she doubted that knowledge would remain between them. As she walked back toward her dormitory, she passed a group of senior students discussing the upcoming war games. Their conversation stopped when they saw her, replaced by speculative looks that made her skin crawl. Back in Dormitory Block 7, Section C, her roommates were already preparing for lights out. Maya went through her evening routine mechanically, her mind racing through the implications of the day's events. As she lay in her narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling, she could hear Kex and Vex whispering in their native tongue. She caught enough words to understand that they were discussing her demonstration in the gymnasium. Word was spreading, just as she had feared it would. Maya closed her eyes and tried to sleep, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new scrutiny. She had spent so long being invisible, being overlooked, being dismissed as just another unremarkable human trying to make it in a galaxy that didn't particularly want her. But invisibility, she was beginning to realize, was just another weapon. And if the Academy was determined to teach her to fight, then she would learn to fight in the way that humans had always fought best, by being underestimated until it was too late for their enemies to adapt. The last thing she remembered before sleep took her was her grandmother's voice, speaking words from the old book of poetry that she kept in her footlocker. The wolf that survives is not the strongest or the fastest, but the one that knows when to show its teeth. Maya had spent 18 months keeping her teeth hidden. But perhaps it was time for the Academy to see what a human could really do when the gloves came off. Maya arrived at Training Bay 7 at exactly 0500 hours, finding Lieutenant Colonel Vash already waiting for her in the dimly lit chamber. The bay was different from the standard training facilities she was accustomed to, smaller, more intimate, with equipment she didn't recognize and walls that seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. Punctual, Vash observed, his vertical pupils adjusting to track her movement as she entered. Good. We will begin with an assessment of your current capabilities, followed by specialized training designed to maximize your species' natural advantages. Maya remained silent, unsure what was expected of her. The Predator studied her for a long moment before activating a holographic display that filled the center of the room with tactical scenarios. Tell me, Cadet Chen, Vash said, his subsonic growl carrying an undertone she couldn't identify, what do you know about the Korvac Prime campaign? The question surprised her. Korvac Prime had been one of the first major joint operations between human forces and the established Alliance military. It was a siege operation that lasted 14 months, she replied carefully. Alliance forces eventually achieved their objectives, though casualties were higher than projected. Casualties were catastrophic, Vash corrected, manipulating the holographic display to show a three-dimensional map of the contested planet. 47% losses among Alliance forces. The defenders were entrenched in a city that had been designed as a fortress, with underground networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. Maya watched as the display showed the progression of the siege, Alliance forces grinding forward meter by bloody meter against determined resistance. The reports I read suggested that human forces performed adequately under difficult circumstances. Vash's expression, what passed for an expression on his predatory features, suggested amusement. The official reports were sanitized for political consumption. The reality was rather different. He manipulated the display again, zooming in on specific sections of the city. Human forces comprised only 8% of the total Alliance strength on Korvac Prime. They were given the most dangerous assignments: urban warfare, tunnel clearing, close-quarters combat in environments where superior technology provided minimal advantage. The display shifted to show casualty figures, broken down by species and unit type. Maya felt her stomach clench as she saw the numbers. Human casualties were proportionally much lower than other species, despite being assigned to the most hazardous operations. How, she asked before she could stop herself. That, Vash said, is what we are here to explore. Observe. The holographic display changed to show security footage from the Korvac Prime campaign. Maya watched as human soldiers moved through the ruins of the contested city like ghosts, appearing from shadows to strike at enemy positions before vanishing again. Their tactics were unlike anything she had studied in her standard military coursework. They used rubble and debris as camouflage, turning every pile of wreckage into a potential hiding spot. They moved in small groups that seemed to operate independently but somehow coordinated their actions with devastating precision. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to anticipate enemy movements with an accuracy that bordered on precognition. The Korvac defenders were hegemony forces, Vash explained as the footage continued. Professional soldiers with centuries of military tradition, equipped with weapons and armor superior to anything the humans carried. They should have slaughtered any force foolish enough to engage them in close combat. Maya watched a sequence where a 4-person human team eliminated a hegemony squad of 12 without losing a single member. The humans moved like water, flowing around obstacles and through openings that seemed too small to accommodate them. Their weapons fire was precise and economical, no wasted shots, no suppressive fire, just cold efficiency. This is impossible, Maya murmured. The size differential alone should have made this outcome unlikely. Size, Vash said, is irrelevant when your opponents cannot target what they cannot see. Watch this segment. The display showed a human soldier, a woman who couldn't have been much older than Maya, moving through a section of tunnel that was supposed to have been cleared hours earlier. She was alone, carrying minimal equipment, her movements so quiet that the recording equipment barely picked up the sound of her breathing. She reached an intersection where 3 hegemony soldiers had set up an ambush position, their heavy weapons trained on the main passage. Instead of retreating or calling for backup, the human soldier did something that made Maya's tactical training rebel in horror. She crawled along the ceiling of the tunnel, using maintenance pipes and structural supports to position herself directly above the enemy position. The attack, when it came, lasted less than 10 seconds. The human dropped from above, landing behind the rightmost enemy soldier and eliminating him with a knife strike before the others could react. She used the first soldier's body as a shield while engaging the second, then closed to hand-to-hand range with the third before he could bring his heavy weapon to bear. When the sequence ended, 3 hegemony soldiers were dead and the human was already moving deeper into the tunnel complex, having acquired additional ammunition and intelligence from the enemy position. This is not standard Alliance military doctrine, Maya said, her voice tight with something between fascination and revulsion. No, Vash agreed. This is human military doctrine. Developed through necessity on a world where your species was prey for millions of years before becoming predators themselves. Every human carries the genetic memory of being hunted, and the hard-won knowledge of how to turn the tables on creatures larger and stronger than themselves. Maya stared at the frozen holographic display, trying to reconcile what she had seen with everything she had been taught about proper military conduct. The Alliance doesn't teach these techniques. The Alliance teaches conventional warfare between conventional forces, Vash replied. Stand-up battles between professional militaries with established rules of engagement and mutually understood concepts of honor. But the galaxy is changing, Cadet Chen. New threats are emerging that do not follow conventional patterns, enemies that cannot be defeated through traditional means. He manipulated the display again, showing intelligence reports and tactical assessments that Maya had never seen before. Images of destroyed colonies, burned-out star systems, and refugee fleets fleeing from something that the reports only referred to as the Devourers. The hegemony was just the beginning, Vash continued. Intelligence suggests that something is moving through the Outer Rim territories, something that does not follow any known pattern of warfare or diplomacy. When it arrives, the Alliance will need warriors who can adapt to threats that conventional training cannot prepare them for. Maya studied the reports, her strategic analysis training automatically cataloging the limited information available. These attack patterns, she said slowly, they're not random. There's a progression here, a systematic approach to territorial acquisition. Correct. What else do you observe? Maya manipulated the display herself, cross-referencing the attack sites with stellar cartography data. They're avoiding heavily defended systems. These are all frontier colonies, mining outposts, research stations. Targets with minimal military presence but significant strategic value. And what does that suggest about the nature of the threat? Maya felt a chill of understanding. They're not just randomly destructive. They're intelligent. They're building something, acquiring resources and territory according to a plan we don't understand yet. Very good, Vash said, his approval evident in the subtle relaxation of his predatory posture. Now, given what you have observed about human tactical capabilities and this emerging threat, what do you conclude? Maya looked at the data again, seeing the patterns more clearly now. The conventional Alliance response to these attacks had been to reinforce frontier defenses and establish patrol routes between vulnerable systems. Standard military doctrine for dealing with raiders and pirates. But, if these were not raiders, if they were advanced scouts for a larger force that was systematically weakening Alliance defensive capabilities while gathering intelligence and resources, then, conventional responses would be worse than useless. They would be playing directly into the enemy's strategy. The Alliance is preparing to fight the wrong war, she said finally. They're positioning forces to defend fixed installations against conventional attacks. But, if the enemy can strike anywhere, avoiding direct confrontation while systematically weakening our overall position.
Continue. Then, we need forces that can operate in the same manner. Small units, highly mobile, capable of independent action behind enemy lines.
Maya paused, the implications of her analysis becoming clear.
We need to fight like humans fought on Korvac Prime.
Vash's vertical pupils dilated in what she was beginning to recognize as his version of a smile.
Excellent. Now we begin your real education.
The next 3 hours were unlike anything Maya had experienced in her 18 months at the academy. Instead of focusing on conventional weapons and tactics, Vash introduced her to concepts that challenged every assumption she had made about military service. He taught her how to read micro-expressions across 17 different species, how to identify psychological pressure points that could be exploited in interrogation or negotiation situations. He showed her how to move through urban environments using techniques developed by human special forces, how to turn everyday objects into weapons, how to survive for weeks behind enemy lines with minimal equipment. Most importantly, he taught her about the human psychological profile that made these capabilities possible. Your species, he explained as Maya practiced a movement sequence designed to exploit the visual blind spots of different alien physiologies, evolved as persistence hunters. You did not need to be faster than your prey, you needed to be more patient, more determined, more willing to pursue your target until it collapsed from exhaustion. Maya completed the sequence, noting how the movements felt natural despite being unlike anything she had learned in standard combat training. But, that doesn't explain the tactical innovations we saw in the Korvac footage.
Persistence hunting requires more than physical endurance, Vash replied.
It requires the ability to think like your prey, to anticipate their movements, to understand their psychology well enough to predict their behavior under stress. Humans developed pattern recognition and empathetic analysis as survival traits. He activated another training program, this one designed to test her ability to predict enemy movements based on limited information. Your species also developed something that most galactic civilizations consider a psychological disorder, the ability to maintain multiple contradictory thought processes simultaneously. Maya paused in her analysis of the tactical scenario.
I don't understand.
Most intelligent species develop linear thinking patterns, Vash explained. They process information sequentially, reaching conclusions based on logical progression from known facts to reasonable assumptions. Humans developed parallel processing, the ability to consider multiple possibilities simultaneously, even when those possibilities contradict each other. The training scenario shifted, presenting Maya with a situation where enemy forces were apparently retreating in disorder. Her standard military training suggested that this was an opportunity to pursue and destroy a broken enemy.
But, something about the pattern felt wrong.
They're not retreating, she said after studying the tactical display for several minutes. This is a fighting withdrawal designed to draw pursuing forces into a prepared ambush position.
But, it's also a genuine retreat from an untenable position.
And, it's a feint to mask a flanking maneuver against our support elements.
Vash nodded approvingly. All three assessments are correct.
A conventional analysis would choose the most likely possibility and develop a response based on that assumption. Human analysis considers all possibilities simultaneously and prepares responses for each contingency.
The implications were staggering.
Maya realized that what she had always considered normal thought processes were actually combat capabilities that most species lacked entirely. The human ability to plan for multiple contingencies, to think in terms of probabilities rather than certainties, to maintain operational security while pursuing seemingly contradictory objectives, these were not just useful skills, they were weapons that her species had carried into space without realizing their strategic value. The training session ended with a live-fire exercise unlike anything Maya had experienced. Instead of standard marksmanship drills or tactical movements, Vash had her navigate through a maze-like environment populated with holographic enemies and civilians. The objectives changed without warning, the rules of engagement shifted based on circumstances she couldn't predict, and success was measured not just by tactical outcomes but by her ability to adapt to constantly changing conditions. Maya found herself moving through the exercise with growing confidence, her movements becoming more fluid as she learned to trust instincts she hadn't known she possessed. She used cover and concealment in ways that felt natural but which violated standard tactical doctrine. She engaged targets at ranges and angles that should have been impossible with the weapons she was carrying. Most importantly, she began to understand how her human psychology could be leveraged as a tactical advantage. When the exercise ended, Maya was breathing hard but exhilarated. For the first time since arriving at the academy, she felt like she was learning something that could make a real difference. Your performance, Vash said as he reviewed the exercise data, exceeded baseline human parameters by 37%. More significantly, you demonstrated adaptive capabilities that our standard training programs cannot replicate. Maya wiped sweat from her forehead, still processing what she had experienced.
How long have you known?
About human capabilities, I mean. I have been studying your species since the first contact protocols were established, Vash replied. The official assessment classified humans as a minor military power with limited strategic value. That assessment was based on conventional analysis of your technology and population base. He called up another holographic display, this one showing psychological and physiological profiles for various alliance species. What the assessors failed to consider was that military capability is not solely determined by technology or numbers. It is determined by adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to do whatever is necessary to achieve victory. Maya studied the profiles, seeing for the first time how human characteristics compared to other species. Where other races showed peaks in specific areas, strength, intelligence, sensory acuity, humans showed a flat but consistent pattern across all categories. They were not the best at anything, but they were adequate at everything.
We're generalists, she said, understanding dawning.
More than that, Vash corrected.
You are adaptive generalists.
Every other species in the Alliance evolved to fill specific ecological niches. They developed specialized capabilities that made them dominant in their native environments.
Humans evolved to survive in any environment by adapting their behavior to match local conditions.
The training session officially ended, but Vash kept her for an additional hour to discuss the theoretical implications of what she had learned.
Maya found herself thinking about her fellow cadets, wondering how many of them were aware of their own species' psychological limitations.
This training, she said as she prepared to leave, it's not standard academy curriculum.
No, Vash agreed.
This training is preparation for assignments that do not yet officially exist.
When the Devourer threat becomes public knowledge, the Alliance will need specialists who can operate outside conventional parameters.
Maya felt a chill of anticipation and dread in equal measure.
And, you think I have the potential for that kind of assignment?
I think, Vash said, his predatory gaze fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity, that you have the potential to redefine what the galaxy considers possible. As Maya made her way back to her dormitory, her mind raced with the implications of what she had learned. The Academy had always presented itself as an institution dedicated to producing military leaders for a stable, predictable universe where conflicts followed established patterns and enemies could be defeated through superior training and equipment. But the universe Vash had shown her was different, unstable, unpredictable, full of threats that could not be addressed through conventional means. It was a universe where survival would depend not on following established protocols but on the ability to create new solutions to unprecedented problems. It was, Maya realized, a universe perfectly suited to the human capacity for adaptive problem-solving. Back in Dormitory Block 7, Section C, her roommates were studying for the next day's examinations. Maya went through the motions of reviewing her coursework, but her mind kept returning to the training session with Vash. She thought about the human soldiers and the Korvac footage, moving through hostile territory with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, Maya began to understand why humans had been accepted into the Alliance despite their apparent limitations. They had not been accepted because of their technology or their military strength. They had been accepted because someone in the Alliance leadership understood that the galaxy was changing, and that survival in the new universe would require capabilities that conventional military doctrine could not provide. As she lay in her bunk that night, listening to the quiet conversations of her alien roommates, Maya realized that her careful strategy of maintaining a low profile had become obsolete. Whether she liked it or not, she was being groomed for something larger and more dangerous than anything she had imagined when she first applied to the Academy. The question was whether she had the courage to become what the situation required, or whether she would retreat back into the comfortable anonymity she had worked so hard to maintain. The answer, she suspected, would be revealed sooner than she was prepared for. 3 weeks after her first training session with Lieutenant Colonel Vash, Maya stood in Formation Hall Alpha with the rest of her year group, listening to Commandant Zektar announce the details of the annual war games. The Commandant was an imposing figure even by Academy standards, a Titan-class Vortak whose species had dominated galactic warfare for over a millennium before joining the Alliance. This year's exercise will simulate the defense of a contested urban environment. Commandant Zektar's voice boomed through the crystalline chamber, his words carrying the harmonic undertones that made Vortak speech so unsettling to other species. You will be divided into 15 teams of 20 cadets each. The scenario is based on recent intelligence reports from frontier territories. Maya felt a chill of recognition. She knew exactly which intelligence reports the Commandant was referencing. The defending teams will be tasked with maintaining control of key infrastructure while under assault from attacking forces employing unconventional tactics, Zektar continued. The exercise will last 72 hours. Weapons are set to training mode, but environmental hazards are real. Medical teams will be standing by. Around her, Maya's fellow cadets exchanged excited murmurs. The war games were the highlight of the academy year, determining final class rankings and influencing assignment selections after graduation. For most students, it was an opportunity to demonstrate their tactical brilliance and leadership potential. For Maya, it had become something else entirely. Team assignments have been made based on psychological compatibility profiles and tactical assessments, the Commandant announced, calling up a holographic display that filled the hall with names and designations. Team leaders have been selected based on academic performance and demonstrated leadership capabilities. Maya scanned the list, finding her name assigned to Team 12. The team leader was listed as Cadet Zara Th, the Valkyrian whose direct questions had started Maya's transformation from invisible student to noticed entity. Her other teammates included representatives from 8 different species, including the Rick the Gorathan and the Zenthri twins. What made her stomach clench was the notation next to Team 12's designation, Special Operations Scenario. After the briefing, Team 12 gathered in one of the strategy planning chambers to begin their preparation. The chamber was designed for multi-species collaboration, with adjustable lighting, atmosphere controls, and furniture that could accommodate a variety of physiologies. Zara Th stood at the head of the holographic tactical display, her forearms moving gracefully as she manipulated the three-dimensional battlefield model. Our scenario is defensive operation in an urban environment designated as Sector 7, she began, her voice carrying the confident authority that had made her a natural choice for team leadership. Maya studied the display, noting details that her enhanced training with Vash had taught her to recognize. The urban environment was not randomly generated, it was based on actual intelligence from the frontier territories, complete with underground networks, civilian populations, and infrastructure that could be weaponized by a determined defender. Intelligence suggests that attacking forces will employ hit-and-run tactics rather than conventional assault patterns, Zara Th continued. Our primary objectives are to maintain control of the Central Command Facility, protect civilian evacuation routes, and prevent enemy forces from accessing the underground transit system. Thorik raised one massive hand. What do we know about the composition of attacking forces? Mixed species teams, emphasis on mobility and stealth rather than direct confrontation, Zara Th replied. Standard counterinsurgency protocols should be effective. Maya felt her tactical training rebel against that assessment, but she remained silent. The human soldiers she had seen in the Korvac footage had not been defeated by standard counterinsurgency protocols. They had adapted to those protocols and turned them into vulnerabilities. Chen, Zara Th called out, apparently noticing her contemplative expression. You've been studying unconventional warfare patterns. What's your assessment? Every eye in the room turned to Maya, and she realized that her reputation had preceded her. Word of her training sessions with Vash had spread through the cadet community, transforming her from an overlooked human into something approaching a specialist consultant. Standard counterinsurgency assumes that the attacking force will behave like insurgents, Maya said carefully. Hit-and-run tactics, minimal casualties, objective-based rather than territorial control. But, if the attacking force has been trained in human tactical doctrine. She paused, manipulating the holographic display to highlight specific areas of the urban environment. They won't behave like insurgents. They'll behave like persistence hunters. They'll identify our patrol patterns, our response protocols, our psychological pressure points. Then, they'll use that information to systematically degrade our defensive capabilities while avoiding direct confrontation.
Kex, one of the Zenthri twins, clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. Elaborate. Maya highlighted the underground transit system that they were supposed to protect. This isn't just an objective for them. It's a weapon. If they gain access to the tunnel networks, they can move undetected throughout the entire defensive zone.
They can strike at any target from unexpected directions, then vanish before we can respond. She manipulated the display again, showing how the tunnel system connected to seemingly unimportant buildings throughout the sector. Worse, they can use our own defensive positions against us. Every fortification we establish becomes a target that they can approach from below. The room had grown very quiet. Maya realized that she was describing tactics that no academy instructor had ever covered in standard coursework.
So what do you recommend?
Zara-TH asked, her tone suggesting genuine interest rather than skeptical challenge. Maya studied the tactical display, her mind racing through the training scenarios Vash had put her through.
We abandon fixed defensive positions.
We turn the urban environment into a hunting ground where we control the movement patterns and they have to react to our initiatives. That's not defensive doctrine, though, Rick rumbled, his massive brow furrowing with confusion.
No, Maya agreed. It's human doctrine.
And if we're facing opponents trained in human tactics, conventional defensive doctrine will get us eliminated in the first 12 hours. The planning session continued for another 4 hours, with Maya finding herself increasingly in the position of tactical advisor despite her junior status on the team. Her enhanced training had given her insights into urban warfare that her teammates lacked, and her ability to think in terms of unconventional solutions proved valuable when analyzing the scenario they would face. By the time they broke for dinner, Team 12 had developed a defensive strategy unlike anything taught in standard academy coursework. Instead of establishing fixed strongpoints and patrol routes, they would operate as a mobile reaction force, using the urban environment's complexity to maintain tactical advantage through superior positioning and information control.
Maya left the planning session with a mixture of excitement and apprehension.
For the first time since arriving at the academy, she was being asked to contribute her capabilities rather than hide them. But she was also aware that her performance in the war games would determine not just her class ranking but her future assignment options. The next morning, Team 12 was transported to the War Games facility aboard a military shuttle along with 4 other defensive teams. The facility was located on a moon that had been terraformed specifically for training purposes, its surface dominated by a sprawling urban complex that could be reconfigured for different scenarios. Maya stared out the shuttle's viewport as they approached the landing zone, studying the city that would be their battlefield for the next 72 hours. From above, it looked like any Alliance urban center, gleaming towers connected by transit tubes, parks and commercial districts arranged in geometric patterns, residential areas spreading outward from the central core. But Maya's enhanced training allowed her to see details that would escape casual observation. The building heights created clear lines of sight for sniper positions.
The street layout funneled movement through predictable choke points.
The underground infrastructure was vulnerable to infiltration and sabotage.
It was, she realized, a perfect environment for the kind of warfare that humans excelled at.
Remember, Zara-TH said as the shuttle touched down on the landing pad, we have 30 minutes to establish our initial positions before the exercise begins. After that, we're on our own until the scenario ends.
Team 12 disembarked and quickly moved toward their assigned sector.
Maya carried standard academy equipment, pulse rifle, sidearm, tactical scanner, communication gear, but she had also requisitioned several items that were not part of the standard loadout. Climbing gear, breaching charges, medical supplies, and a compact computer terminal that could interface with urban infrastructure systems. Their assigned defensive zone was Sector 7, a mixed commercial and residential area that included 3 high-rise buildings, 2 transit stations, and a network of underground service tunnels that connected to the main transportation system. According to the scenario briefing, they were responsible for preventing attacking forces from gaining access to these tunnels while protecting civilian evacuation routes.
Positions, Zara-TH commanded as they reached the central plaza that would serve as their command post. Remember, we stick to the plan until we have reason to adapt. Maya moved toward her assigned position on the 20th floor of the tallest building in their sector.
The elevation would give her an excellent view of the surrounding area and multiple escape routes if her position was compromised. More importantly, it would allow her to coordinate the mobile defense strategy they had developed. As she climbed the emergency stairwell, the elevators had been disabled to simulate battle damage. Maya thought about the attacking teams they would face. According to the briefing, they would be composed of cadets from the same year group, trained in the same doctrine, equipped with the same weapons. But Maya suspected that at least some of the attacking teams would include cadets who had received enhanced training similar to her own sessions with Vash. The war games were not just a competition between students, they were a testing ground for new tactical concepts that the academy was exploring. She reached her observation post and began setting up her equipment, using the enhanced scanning gear to map the surrounding area in detail. The tactical scanner could detect movement, heat signatures, and electronic emissions within a 2-kilometer radius. More importantly, it could be programmed to recognize pattern anomalies that might indicate the presence of hidden threats. Team 12, this is Overwatch, Maya reported over the communication link, using the call sign they had assigned to her position.
Scanning sweep complete. No hostile contacts detected. All civilians have been evacuated from our sector. Acknowledged, Overwatch, Zarath's voice came back. All teams report ready status. Exercise begins in 60 seconds. Maya settled into her position, adjusting her equipment for maximum effectiveness. Through the building's windows, she could see the other members of Team 12 taking their positions throughout the sector. They looked confident and prepared, ready to demonstrate the tactical excellence that the academy had trained into them. But Maya knew that confidence could be a liability when facing opponents who fought by different rules. The exercise began with the subtle tone that indicated activation of the training scenario. Somewhere in the urban complex, attacking teams were beginning their infiltration of the defensive zones. Standard doctrine suggested that initial contact would not occur for at least 6 hours, giving both sides time to establish their positions and develop intelligence about enemy capabilities. Maya's scanner detected the first anomaly within 20 minutes.
Overwatch to all teams, she reported, her voice calm despite the adrenaline spike she felt.
Motion detected in Tunnel Access 7. Single contact, moving toward our sector. Confirmed, Zarath replied. Response Team Alpha, investigate and report. Maya watched through her scope as 3 members of Team 12 moved toward the tunnel access point.
They followed standard academy protocols, proper spacing, covering fire positions, clear communication procedures. Everything they had been trained to do when responding to potential threats. The attacking cadet eliminated all 3 of them in less than 30 seconds. Maya watched in stunned silence as the lone attacker emerged from the tunnel access point, engaged her teammates with surgical precision, and vanished back into the underground system before backup could arrive. The entire encounter had been recorded by her scanning equipment, and reviewing the footage confirmed what her tactical training had already told her. They were not facing academy-trained opponents. They were facing something else entirely. All teams, this is Overwatch, Maya reported, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Response Team Alpha has been eliminated. Attacker used non-standard tactics and equipment. We need to adapt our defensive strategy immediately. The communication link erupted with confused voices as her remaining teammates tried to understand what had happened. Maya tuned out the chatter and focused on her scanner readouts, looking for additional signs of infiltration. She found them immediately. Heat signatures in 3 different tunnel systems, all converging on their sector from unexpected directions. Electronic emissions from locations that should have been empty. Movement patterns that suggested coordination between multiple small teams rather than a single large assault force. Team 12, Maya said, cutting through the communication chatter with command authority she hadn't known she possessed, we are facing human-trained opposition. Standard defensive protocols are compromised. Implementing Contingency Plan Alpha. Contingency Plan Alpha was something they had discussed but never formally approved, a complete abandonment of fixed positions in favor of mobile warfare throughout their assigned sector. It was contrary to everything the Academy taught about defensive operations, but Maya's enhanced training had convinced her that conventional tactics would be suicidal against human-style opponents. Negative, Overwatch, Zarath's voice came back, strained but determined.
We maintain defensive positions and follow standard protocols. This is still an academy exercise.
Maya felt a moment of crystalline clarity as she realized that her team leader had not grasped the true nature of what they were facing.
Zarath was trying to win an academy exercise while Maya was preparing to fight a war.
All teams, Maya said, making a decision that would define the rest of her career. This is Overwatch assuming tactical command under Emergency Protocol 7. Team leader is compromised by adherence to ineffective doctrine.
Implementing human countermeasures immediately. The communication link went silent.
Emergency Protocol 7 was a theoretical provision that allowed any team member to assume command if the designated leader was incapacitated or making decisions that endangered the mission.
Maya was invoking it based on tactical assessment rather than casualty reports, which was unprecedented in Academy history.
It was also, she realized, exactly what a human would do when faced with leadership that refused to adapt to changing circumstances. Overwatch, you are exceeding your authority, Zarath's voice came back, anger evident despite her attempts at professional composure. Zarath, Maya replied, her voice carrying a calm certainty that surprised even her. In the next 10 minutes, attacking forces will emerge from tunnel systems at 6 different points throughout our sector. They will eliminate every fixed position we have established, capture our command post, and complete their mission objectives while suffering minimal casualties. She paused, watching her scanner as additional enemy contacts appeared exactly where her analysis had predicted they would. Unless we abandon everything the Academy taught us about defensive warfare and start fighting like humans. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough for the first attacking teams to emerge from the tunnel system and engage the fixed positions that Team 12 had established according to standard doctrine.
Maya was right about the timing.
She was right about the locations.
She was right about the tactics.
And, as she watched her teammates scramble to respond to attacks that conventional doctrine had not prepared them for, Maya realized that the war games had become something entirely different from what the Academy intended. They had become the first test of whether Alliance military doctrine could adapt to threats that fought by human rules. The answer, Maya suspected, would determine not just her own future but the future of military doctrine throughout the Alliance. Maya's assumption of tactical command created chaos within Team 12's communication network for exactly 17 seconds. Then, the attacking forces struck 3 more fixed positions simultaneously, eliminating another 6 of her teammates with the same surgical precision she had witnessed earlier. All teams, this is Overwatch, Maya broadcast, her voice cutting through the confusion with absolute authority.
Emergency protocols are now in effect. Abandon all fixed positions immediately. Rally Point Alpha is compromised. Implement dispersal pattern Delta and prepare for mobile operations.
There was a moment of hesitation before Thoric's voice came over the communication link.
Overwatch, this is Heavy Team. Confirming dispersal pattern Delta. What are your instructions? Maya felt a surge of gratitude toward the massive Gorathan.
By acknowledging her command, he had given the other survivors a framework for decision-making that might keep them alive. Heavy Team, enemy forces are using tunnel systems for concealed movement, she replied, manipulating her scanner to track the multiple contacts moving beneath their sector. They will emerge at infrastructure access points to strike our positions and, then, withdraw before we can respond.
We need to deny them that advantage. How? Kex's voice, tight with controlled fear after witnessing the elimination of his twin brother.
Maya studied her tactical display, cross-referencing the tunnel network with the building layouts and civilian infrastructure.
The solution was obvious once she applied human tactical principles instead of conventional alliance doctrine. We collapse the tunnels, she said.
Force them to operate on the surface where our defensive advantages are meaningful.
That's destruction of civilian infrastructure, Zarath's voice came back, strained with disbelief.
It violates the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement, Maya replied, her voice carrying a chill that surprised her, assume that your opponents will also follow the rules.
Human tactical doctrine assumes that survival takes precedence over protocol.
She activated the building's fire suppression system, causing emergency lighting to illuminate the stairwells and alerting any remaining occupants to evacuate. Then, she began downloading schematics for the underground infrastructure, identifying structural weak points that could be exploited with the breaching charges she had requisitioned. Overwatch, Thoric's voice carried a note of understanding. Are you suggesting we turn this exercise into asymmetric warfare? I'm suggesting, Maya replied, studying the tunnel schematics with growing confidence, that we stop pretending this is an exercise and start treating it like a war. The distinction was crucial. Academy exercises were designed to test tactical competence within established parameters, with clearly defined objectives and rules that ensured fair competition between teams. Wars were chaotic, unpredictable events where survival depended on the ability to adapt faster than your opponents. Maya had been trained for war. Heavy team, take position at junction point 7, she commanded, transmitting coordinate data to Thoric's scanner. Light team, establish overwatch on building complex 4. Support team, begin setting charges at structural points Alpha through Echo. Zara-TH, she added, her voice softening slightly, I need you to coordinate civilian evacuation protocols. If we're going to fight this like humans, we need to ensure that non-combatants are protected. For a moment, Maya thought her former team leader might continue to contest her assumption of command. Then, Zara-TH's voice came back, professional despite the strain. Confirmed, Overwatch. Civilian evacuation in progress. Maya smiled grimly as she began her own descent from the observation post. Her teammates had adapted to the new tactical reality with impressive speed, but the real test would come when they faced their opponents directly. She reached the building's maintenance level and began placing breaching charges at the structural points she had identified. The charges were designed for creating entry points through walls and barriers, but, applied to load-bearing supports, they could bring down entire sections of tunnel network. All teams, prepare for infrastructure collapse in 60 seconds, she broadcast. After detonation, enemy forces will be forced to surface movement only. We then implement Hunting Pattern Alpha. Hunting Pattern Alpha was not an academy tactical formation. It was a technique that Vash had taught her, based on human persistence hunting strategies that had evolved over millions of years. Instead of waiting for the enemy to attack fixed positions, they would track their opponents through the urban environment and eliminate them through sustained pressure rather than decisive engagement. The breaching charges detonated with a series of muffled explosions that sent vibrations through the entire building complex. Maya's scanner immediately detected the collapse of 3 major tunnel sections, forcing the hidden attackers to either retreat to the periphery of the sector or emerge onto the surface. Most of them chose to emerge. Contact, Kex reported from his overwatch position. Multiple enemy teams surfacing at access points 2, 5, and 9. They're moving toward civilian evacuation routes. Confirmed, Maya replied, studying the tactical display as her scanner tracked the emerging threats. Support team, intercept team Alpha at checkpoint 7. Heavy team, block retreat routes at junction point 4. Light team, maintain overwatch and call targets. Maya herself began moving toward contact point 5, where her scanner had detected the largest concentration of enemy forces. As she moved through the urban environment, she found herself applying techniques that Vash had taught her, using building shadows for concealment, moving in patterns that exploited the visual blind spots of different species, maintaining situational awareness through sound and peripheral vision rather than direct observation. She reached contact point 5 just as the attacking team emerged from the damaged tunnel system. There were 4 of them, 2 humans, a Kylos, and an Ascorian, all moving with the fluid coordination that marked advanced tactical training. Maya recognized the humans immediately. They were part of the special program that Vash had mentioned, cadets who had received the same enhanced training that she had undergone. Seeing them in action confirmed her tactical assessment. These were not academy students playing war games, they were warriors testing combat doctrine. She observed their movement patterns for 30 seconds, noting how they communicated through gesture rather than voice, how they used the urban environment for cover and concealment, how they coordinated their actions to achieve maximum tactical effect with minimal exposure. Then, she attacked. Maya's first shot eliminated the Kylos team member before he could bring his weapon to bear. Her second shot forced the Ascorian into cover behind a damaged vehicle. The 2 humans immediately adapted to the threat, one laying down suppressing fire while the other maneuvered for a flanking position. But Maya had anticipated their response. Instead of remaining in her initial position, she had already moved to a secondary firing point that gave her clear lines of sight to both human attackers. Her third and fourth shots eliminated them before they could complete their tactical maneuver. The Ascorian, finding himself alone and outmaneuvered, attempted to retreat back into the tunnel system. Maya's fifth shot caught him as he reached the access point. "Contact point 5 secure," she reported, studying her scanner for additional threats. "For enemy eliminated, no friendly casualties." "Overwatch," Thoric's voice came back, heavy with respect. "Contact point 4 secure." "Heavy team eliminated 5 enemy with no losses." Similar reports came in from the other teams. In the space of 15 minutes, Team 12 had eliminated 23 attacking opponents while suffering only 1 additional casualty. They had achieved this by abandoning everything they had been taught about defensive warfare and implementing tactics that no academy instructor had ever covered. Maya checked her chronometer and realized that only 2 hours had passed since the exercise began. According to standard academy projections, initial contact should not have occurred for another 4 hours, and decisive engagement should have been delayed for at least 12 hours. Instead, Team 12 had achieved tactical dominance over their assigned sector and eliminated nearly half of the attacking forces that had been deployed against them. "All teams," Maya broadcast, "enemy forces in our sector have been neutralized or forced to withdraw. Implementing Pursuit Protocol Beta. We take the fight to them." "Overwatch," Zaratich's voice came back, uncertain. "Pursuit operations are not part of our defensive mission parameters." Maya smiled as she gathered her equipment and prepared to leave the safety of their secured sector. "Zaratich, human tactical doctrine doesn't distinguish between defensive and offensive operations. There's only winning and losing." Pursuit Protocol Beta was another technique from her enhanced training sessions, a methodology for tracking retreating enemy forces and preventing them from regrouping for subsequent attacks. It required abandoning the safety of prepared positions to operate in contested territory, but it offered the possibility of achieving decisive tactical outcomes rather than merely surviving until the exercise ended. As Team 12 moves beyond their assigned sector boundaries, Maya realized that they were violating another fundamental academy principle, the containment of exercises to predetermined areas. But human tactical doctrine emphasized the importance of denying the enemy sanctuary, and that required pursuing threats regardless of arbitrary geographical limitations. Her scanner detected enemy concentrations in 3 adjacent sectors, all of them apparently struggling to adapt to attacks from teams that had received enhanced training. Maya studied the tactical situation, noting how the various defensive teams were responding to unconventional assault tactics. Most of them were following standard academy protocols, establishing fixed positions and waiting for clearly defined threats to present themselves. They were being systematically eliminated by attackers who refused to cooperate with conventional expectations. "All teams," Maya commanded, "we are going to assist defensive forces in adjacent sectors. Our mission parameters now include the elimination of all hostile forces within the exercise area." It was a radical expansion of their original objectives, but Maya's tactical analysis had convinced her that half measures would be ineffective against opponents who had been trained to exploit conventional limitations. If they were going to fight, they needed to fight to win decisively. Team 12 spent the next 4 hours moving through the urban complex like a pack of persistence hunters, tracking down and eliminating the attacking teams that had been trained in human tactical doctrine. Maya's enhanced training proved invaluable in predicting enemy movements and identifying optimal engagement opportunities. More importantly, her teammates learned to adapt their own capabilities to support human-style warfare. Thoric's natural strength became an asset in close-quarters combat situations where conventional weapons were ineffective. Kex's enhanced reflexes allowed him to serve as point scout in hostile territory. Zaratich's tactical intelligence proved crucial in coordinating multi-team operations across expanded areas. By the time the exercise entered its final 12 hours, Team 12 had effectively assumed command of the entire defensive operation. Maya found herself coordinating the actions of 7 different teams, implementing tactical concepts that transformed the wargames from a series of isolated defensive actions into a comprehensive counteroffensive campaign. The attacking forces, despite their enhanced training and superior initial positioning, found themselves outmatched by opponents who had abandoned conventional limitations in favor of adaptive warfare. They were forced into increasingly desperate tactics, taking greater risks for diminishing returns.
Maya's scanner detected the final enemy concentration in the exercise area just as dawn began to break over the artificial horizon of the training facility.
12 attackers had barricaded themselves in the central command complex, apparently hoping to achieve their primary objective through a last-ditch assault on the facility's control systems. All teams, Maya broadcast, studying the tactical situation with grim satisfaction. Enemy forces have been cornered in the primary objective area. This is not a siege situation.
We are going to eliminate them quickly and decisively.
She outlined her assault plan, noting how her teammates had evolved beyond their original academy training to become something that resembled actual combat veterans. They had learned to think like humans, to fight like humans, to win like humans. The final assault lasted exactly 18 minutes. Team 12 and their allied forces struck the command complex from 6 different directions simultaneously, using techniques that no academy instructor had ever taught but which felt natural to warriors who had learned to trust their adaptive instincts. When the exercise officially ended 12 hours ahead of schedule, Maya stood in the central command chamber surrounded by the eliminated remains of the attacking forces.
Her scanner showed no hostile contacts anywhere in the exercise area.
Her teams had achieved complete tactical dominance through the application of human warfare principles. But, as she looked around at the aftermath of what had been intended as an academy training exercise, Maya realized that she had fundamentally changed not just the outcome of the war games but the nature of what military training could accomplish.
She had proven that human tactical doctrine was not just an interesting theoretical concept, it was a revolutionary approach to warfare that could transform adequate soldiers into devastating combatants.
The question was what the academy leadership would do with that knowledge.
Maya suspected she was about to find out.
The debriefing session took place in the academy's highest security conference chamber, a crystalline dome that provided complete privacy through advanced shielding technology. Maya sat at a curved table surrounded by the academy's senior leadership, feeling distinctly out of place among beings whose careers spanned centuries and whose tactical decisions had shaped the course of galactic warfare. Commandant Zektar presided over the session, his massive vortac frame dominating the chamber even while seated. To his right sat Admiral Kethvar, the Academy's strategic oversight coordinator and one of the most respected military minds in Alliance space. Lieutenant Colonel Vash occupied a position directly across from Maya, his predatory gaze unreadable but somehow approving. Cadet Chen, Commandant Zektar began, his voice carrying harmonics that made the chamber's walls resonate softly. Your performance in the recent War Games exercise has necessitated a comprehensive review of Academy training protocols and tactical doctrine.
Maya remained silent, unsure whether she was being commended or court-martialed. Admiral Kethvar activated a holographic display that filled the center of the table with tactical data from the exercise. Your team achieved objectives that our computer models considered impossible given the force ratios and tactical parameters. More significantly, your unconventional approach influenced 7 other defensive teams to abandon standard doctrine in favor of adaptive tactics. The display showed a time-lapse reconstruction of the entire exercise, highlighting the moments when Maya's decisions had cascaded through the broader tactical situation. Maya watched herself transform from an overlooked team member into the de facto commander of a multi-team operation that had achieved decisive victory through methods that violated virtually every academy protocol. The attacking teams, Lieutenant Colonel Vash interjected, were composed entirely of cadets who had received enhanced training in unconventional warfare. They were expected to achieve their objectives within 48 hours using tactics that conventional academy training could not counter effectively. Maya felt her stomach clench. The exercise had not been a training scenario, it had been a test of whether standard Alliance military doctrine could adapt to threats that fought like humans. Instead, Admiral Kethvar continued, they were systematically defeated by forces employing tactical concepts that are not part of our standard curriculum. This outcome has significant implications for Alliance military preparedness. Commandant Zektar leaned forward, his presence filling Maya's peripheral vision with predatory intensity. Cadet Chen, Lieutenant Colonel Vash has informed us that you have been receiving specialized instruction in human tactical doctrine. Is this assessment accurate?
Yes, sir, Maya replied, her voice steady despite the weight of attention focused on her.
And this instruction covered techniques that are not part of standard academy curriculum?
Yes, sir.
Techniques that proved decisive in defeating opponents who had been trained using similar methodologies?
Maya paused, realizing that her answer might determine not just her own future but the direction of Alliance military doctrine.
Yes, sir.
But the techniques weren't decisive because they were superior to standard doctrine. They were decisive because they were unexpected.
Admiral Kethvar's expression shifted slightly, indicating interest. Elaborate.
The attacking teams had been trained to exploit the limitations of conventional alliance tactics, Maya explained, calling up her own tactical analysis on the holographic display. They knew how defensive teams would respond to infiltration attempts, how command structures would adapt to unexpected threats, how standard protocols would constrain tactical flexibility. She manipulated the display to show specific engagement sequences from the exercise. But they hadn't been trained to counter opponents who would abandon those protocols entirely. When we stopped fighting like an academy defensive team and started fighting like humans, their tactical advantages became irrelevant. You transformed a defensive exercise into an offensive campaign, Commandant Zektar observed. This required your teammates to violate their training and operate outside established parameters. It required them to think like humans, Maya corrected, then realized how that might sound to alien military leaders.
To think like persistence hunters rather than territorial defenders.
Lieutenant Colonel Vash activated another section of the holographic display, showing tactical analyses that Maya had never seen before.
Intelligence reports from frontier territories confirm that this distinction is crucial for understanding the emerging threat situation. Enemy forces are not operating according to conventional military doctrine.
The display showed attack patterns, force distributions, and tactical sequences that were unlike anything taught in Alliance military academies. Maya studied the data, noting similarities to the techniques that Vash had shown her during their training sessions. These are human tactics, she said, the implications hitting her like a physical blow.
Someone is teaching our enemies to fight like humans.
That assessment is classified at the highest levels, Admiral Kethvar said sharply. But your analysis confirms intelligence that we have been developing through other channels. Maya stared at the tactical data, her enhanced training allowing her to see patterns that conventional analysis might miss. The enemy force structure was based on small, independent units operating without centralized command.
Their attack patterns prioritized adaptation over overwhelming force. Their strategic objectives focused on psychological pressure rather than territorial conquest.
They're not just copying human tactics, she realized.
They're implementing human strategic doctrine. They're trying to turn the Alliance into prey. The chamber fell silent for several long moments. Maya.